Hi, this is Go For It Randy. I have a very special video to share with you today. This is going to blow a lot of people's minds because Jesus Christ came down from heaven in 1989 down to earth in Jerusalem and met Ron Wyatt right there in the Garden Tomb area. And there was an eyewitness to this event. Jesus was wearing literally the same clothes that he would wear back 2,000 years ago when he walked the earth. Very unusual clothes. And Jesus looked like he was in his human body, but of course, he has a supernatural body. And he literally talked to Ron Wyatt and encouraged him because Ron needed some encouragement at a very pivotal time in his life. Also, Ron Wyatt met 4 angels inside where the Ark of the Covenant was housed in this secret cavern, whatever you want to call it, that God literally made. So let's get right to the video.
When I arrived at the Jerusalem hotel, sitting on the front stoop was this medical doctor who said, "Ron, I'm here to help you." Well, bless his heart, he hadn't asked my permission or anything, said nothing, he just popped up. Well, that makes me rather unlikely to give him the combination to the vault, if you know what I mean. And so, anyway, I was convinced that one of my dumb mistakes had been too many, and that God couldn't use me anymore. So he'd sent this fellow there so I couldn't work on the Ark of the Covenant. And he would have had to share my experiences in order to know what a crushing blow that was. See, I know I'm unworthy. And I thought, okay, finally you messed up and you're out of it. I said a little prayer. I said, Lord, I'm sorry. If there's anything I can help, whoever you want to finish the job, just let me know and I'll do what I can. Well, I couldn't work on the Ark of the Covenant with that guy around, so we volunteered to clean the Garden Tomb. In the back part of it, there was about 100 years worth of garbage and one thing and another that had just been thrown back there over the years. So we hauled out of there something like 20 big truckloads of trash. And it was hot that September, blistering hot. And I had gotten a little fan to get some air stirring, and the fan died. Well, added on the rest of my miseries, that was almost too much. You know, you remember the story of Jonah and his gourd vine? I could sympathize with him at that point in time. Anyway, I told everybody else, I said, look, just find you a shade somewhere and eat your lunches. And I'll try to fix the fan. So I just sat down. Any of you been there to the Garden Tomb? Okay. You know where the little chapel is? Around the corner? I was sitting right flat on the ground in front of that chapel. And you know there's a set of steps that come up to a sidewalk and goes out to the main sidewalk. Anyway, I was sitting down there working on this fan. Didn't even bother to unplug it. And a voice said to me,
God bless you and what you're doing here. So I looked up, and this being was up on this landing, the top of those stairs. Looked exactly like I figured Christ would have looked. And the outfit that he had on was not exactly like the Muslims wear today, but it was closer to that than it was anything else I had seen. So I said, are you from around here, sir? And he said, no. And I said, well, then you're a tourist. And he said, no. And I thought, well, he doesn't want to talk with me. Obviously, I didn't know what else to say. And then he said, I'm on my way from South Africa to the New Jerusalem.
Well, Well, that certainly eliminated a whole lot of possibilities there. Immediately that proved that he was a heavenly being. And I just sat there, didn't say anything, and he looked at, just continued to look at me. He said, "God bless you." And what you're doing here. He was at the top of those stairs. And he walked right back that little short sidewalk, took a right at that big pine tree, and headed for the front gate. Well, this doctor of all people was the only one in earshot. And he was back under some shrubs in the shade eating his lunch, and he piped up and he says, "Ron, do you suppose we've been talking with an angel?" And I said, "At least." Well, I worked with great enthusiasm for the rest of that day. When we left the garden tomb, I asked the ladies in there, I said, "What did you think of that big, tall man dressed in ancient Jewish garb?" And they looked at me kind of funny. And they said, "There's been nobody in here like that today." And then one of them said, "Well, Mr. Wyatt, there's never been anybody in here like that." So somewhere between where he turned right past that pine tree and before he got to the office, he went on to the New Jerusalem. Now, folks, for Christ himself to come down to encourage me about the excavation of the Ark of the Covenant tells me that it's very important to God.
And it took him a couple of months before he would tell me that he knew that he was never going to bring the ark out, that he would only bring the tables of stone out, or that they would be brought out one day.
There are 4 angels that have the responsibility of looking after the Ark of the Covenant. All right, my 4th time I entered that chamber, everything was cleaned out. All of the furnishings of the temple were in the proper positions that they were to be in, and except there was no curtain between the holy and the most holy place, and there's a reason for that. But anyway, when I walked in, there were 4 angels standing in the chamber, and they looked just like people on the street. When I saw them, I was rather stunned, and I was going to ask, "How did you get in here?" or something to that effect. But I found I couldn't move or talk or nothing like that. So one of them instructed me to set up my video camera and aim it at the Ark of the Covenant. They went over, each took a corner of the mercy seat, lifted it up, and said, "Take the tables of stone out of the Ark of the Covenant. God wants everyone to see those." So I went over and I took it out. I wasn't able to move until he told me to do these things. And so they put the lid back on, or the mercy seat back on. I stood there with the tables of stone. I didn't know what to do with them. The angel came and took them and put them on a shelf in the side of the chamber there. Behind the Ark of the Covenant, the whole wall is the most beautiful crystal I couldn't even imagine it. The colors of the rainbow are rippling in all directions behind it. I mean, it is mind-boggling, and I know that God, it's going to be there. I was told, and specifically what law, but people aren't ready to hear that yet. Men are working on a religious law that will require you and me to break God's 10 Commandments. When that law is passed, is when the tables of stone are to be put on public display, and people are to be made aware that God requires us to keep those 10 Commandments, all right? And that's when it will be shown. Now, I went to my hotel, I looked in the viewfinder, played back my video to make sure I had it, and then it struck me, where am I going to keep this? You know, where can I keep it that it'll be safe? So I took it and I went back in the chamber, and I mumbled something. I meant to say, I don't know where I can keep this safe. The angel took it and laid it on the tables of stone. So I have no access to the video of that until they're ready. Every time I'm here, I come and check, folks, to see if I can do it. Right? I suspect strongly that these laws were probably already formulated.
So you have access to that area now without having to go through the excavation site?
I don't have to go through the entrance, the original entrance, where I found my way in 1982.
And the room originally had very limited ceiling clearance, so there was a lot of debris that was
right.
removed.
When I first found it, I wouldn't have even gone in the chamber. Have you heard about the little Arab fellow that was helping me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Has everybody heard about it? If you haven't, hold up your hand.
John.
All right. This young man, I'm a fairly good-sized fella. You know, there's folks here that are bigger. But some of these chambers had little entrances, and so I would make a hole big enough for him to get in. He'd crawl in, I'd hand him the light, and he'd shine it around in the corners and on the floor and the ceiling. I'd stick my head in and decide whether I wanted to make a hole big enough for me to get in. And so this particular one, we had made a hole big enough for him to get in. And by the way, it was the only chamber that had a stalactite hanging down over the entrance hole. Now, I don't know if that was significant or, you know, but that's true. I snapped that off and I have it. But anyway, when he crawled in there, I was starting to hand him the flashlight, and he come tearing out of there totally terrified. What you would call mindless terror. And he said, "What's in there? What's in there? I'm not going back in there." And I said, "Well, what did you see?" And he said, "I didn't see anything, but I'm not going back in there." Well, he had been in tighter places and all of this. So that told me if that wasn't the chamber, it was the direction. So I made the hole bigger, crawled in, and it was full of rocks, up to within about 18 inches of a rough ceiling, similar to this one. And so I started looking down between the rocks, cracks and crevices, and I saw 3 places where it reflected gold, and it was level. You know, they were 3 equally distant from where I was. So I started taking these rocks and putting them aside. I ended up with some behind my shoulders, holding them back. Turned out that it was the table of showbread. And so anyway, what I found was that they had put the furnishings in there, had put animal skins over them, and then boards of wood, and then covered all of that with stones to within about 18 inches of the ceiling.
The first day I met him, he talked about the Ark of the Covenant, and he talked about it right up until he died. I know he thought about it every single day of his life.